All right, so I had a interesting experience last night. I was thinking about a friend of mine who I was pretty close with, in the latter years of high school. And at a certain point, things became more and more difficult between us. And eventually I had to sort of step away from that relationship because, it just wasn't good for me. I don't think it was good for him either because, sometimes, when we need to focus on ourselves, we can't really be of service to others. And when we try, what we end up doing is just becoming, enablers. And we kind of lose ourselves in the process when we try to be these martyrs for people who are kind of determined to, sink to the bottom to prove something, like some kind of, it's an odd thing. It's an odd thing when people are completely blind, and yet, like, it's weird when people are more confident than us in their expression, but there's no real substance behind their confidence, and all their actions are very apparently self-destructive. And there's this indignance and righteousness in people who choose suffering, and this sort of hubris, this arrogance that nothing is sacred, nothing is good, and yet betrayal. They feel constantly betrayed by those around them, but they offer nothing. And so because they offer nothing, that is apparent to anyone else who chooses to be in their life, yet they hold themselves up in a way that is, there's like a, almost like they deify themselves in some way, that they have some specialness about them, that we're supposed to go down this, the sinking ship with them, even though it won't really, the net effect will be that we'll just, be both at the bottom of the, of the sea. And so this is, what I've experienced for many years. This the way I thought of him when I look back at him. And, a lot of my feelings about him were colored with my anger about him, and my anger about his blindness, and my anger about his insistence that I had, by cutting him out of my life. He would write me letters over the internet in my email. Every so often he would write me a letter. He would sometimes write me a letter of trying to be conciliatory, but I knew nothing had changed with him fundamentally. And then, that would be followed by my silence, which would be followed by another letter that he would send me that would be, an admonishment of me and, anger toward me, and essentially, how I was cruel for abandoning him. But he never really saw, who his friend was. He was never really, I don't think, capable of seeing anything other than his own need. And I think because I was the closest person in his life to making him feel like his need was being met for a time, he grew very attached to me. And when I was gone, when I decided to leave him behind, essentially, he saw that as a betrayal. But he didn't see his own betrayal of me in all the ways which he treated me. And last night I kind of saw that he was largely blind to his betrayal of me, that he couldn't even see it, perhaps, or perhaps he could on some level see it, but he saw no choice other than, to behave the way that he did. And so I think for the first time, perhaps I saw him in a slightly different light. I saw him and I tried to see him through his own eyes. I tried to see, myself through his eyes. Because I always have, we all kind of have our own sort of egocentric point of view of who we are. And we don't, we often believe that we know others, but often we don't. What we don't know about others is how they know us and how they see us and how they perceive us. And we often don't consider, that we don't often consider the possibility that we may be able to catch a glimpse of what it is that they see and how they view the world. Because in some ways or another, the only way, so much of what we learn is to view the people in this world through a lens of, this person is being nice to me, this person is being mean to me. And then we sort of have like this long list of, all their actions, that were kindly to us and the actions that were nasty to us. And so when we say we know this person, we sort of know them through the lens of what is pertinent to this way of evaluating people. Are they good for us or are they bad for us? But I think that sort of interferes with actually seeing what is really, what are they really like? What are they really like? And what is really their perception of us? So we have this, there's this whole world that is always going on all around us, but we miss most of it because we see the world through this lens of, what we've sort of trained our mind to filter out and focus on. And so, I think that is one reason why, meditation is helpful, is because it allows us to go back into a neutral place, which is, attempting to, be quiet for, through some method, essentially reaching a point where you can become silent and realize that there's something else going on other than this, chatter that is sort of constantly reinforcing our point of view, which kind of traps us inside of our point of view. And sometimes our own point of view can be detrimental to us, and we can be blind to it because we're not able to take a break from it long enough to see, where it's harmful. But so I was able to, yesterday, I had a very sort of a quietness that, is a result of, many years of meditation and contemplation that I've practiced within myself. And so in that quietness, I was able to catch a glimpse of how my former friend, viewed the situation, viewed me, viewed my, lack of correspondence to him. So for a moment I felt his anguish, and I could understand his anguish, not from my point of view, but from his point of view. That somebody, very meaningful to him, who he thought was going to play a meaningful role in his life, for a long time to come, had suddenly vanished. And, he couldn't see, he could not, it was too painful for him to see his own behavior contributing to how things turned out between him and I. He could only see that in his mind he loved somebody and that person abandoned him. And as much as he loved me for my virtues, the love that I gave to him, in the absence of that love, that creates a powerful shadow of hatred, of feeling like he'd been lied to, feeling like I gave him some love to deceive him into loving me, and then I pulled it away without a real explanation. Now, I've tried to explain a lot of things to him, but he didn't have ears to hear, so I could never really get through to him, for him to take a moment to step back from his egocentric point of view. And from my point of view, he chose to end the relationship more than I chose to end the relationship. Because in my mind, I had no problem with him. I had no problem with him. It was his behavior. His behavior, his words might have said, I love you, but his behavior said, I hate you. Get the fuck away from me. I hate you. I do what I want. I don't need to hear anything from you. You don't know anything. I know better than you. You're an idiot. You're a moron. What are you doing? What is all this nonsense that you're talking about? So that's sort of the way he treated me, very dismissively and insultingly a lot of the time. And so he didn't see that was, that was him choosing against a relationship with me, because what I call a relationship is not, something where I'm being abused, where someone is being abusive and not really giving me the space to exist. I need people in my life that are solid enough in their individuality that they don't feel the need to compete, with me in order to establish their own identity. And that is essentially what he was constantly doing, was competing with me, because his identity was like a small thing that needed constant validation. And that's sort of, what he felt the world owed to him, because he existed and he thought existing is enough. Existing is enough for that the world owes you a livelihood. But the truth is, the world, whether or not it owes you anything, is very meaningless, because it's more important to be present with what the world really is like in order to live in this world. So whatever we want to believe about this world, it doesn't matter. We have to be present enough with what is, regardless of what our values say that the world should be. The world is more, in terms of the physical power, in the physical realm has power, and it's sort of like, what Jesus says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give unto God what is God's, So in this world, which, you could say is like ruled by people like Caesar, you have to kind of deal with the reality of what that world means. And you can believe whatever the hell you want, but it this world will not respect it. And so that's why we need to find, that's why a true freedom comes from stepping away from the matters of this material realm, and finding a place within ourselves that's transcendent of this world, a place where we are free. Because this world is as powerful as it seems, and it does have power, over our body, but it has no power over our soul, essentially. So, but people who don't believe in a soul, which my friend did not, he was not able to see that, his beliefs of what should be had nothing to do with what the world is actually like. And that's, I think, a mistake that people often make who fall more into the materialist sort of category of thinking, is they kind of sacrifice their freedom and give it over to this world, and then they're like in a never-ending battle with this world, because this world will never be just. This world will never give you what you're owed. It's not meant to. So anyhow, I saw more where he was coming from by being able to kind of put aside, like what my own feelings about him were in my own disappointment, And I could see just how devastating of a loss it was for him, and how he saw it. He saw himself, his world became very dark from his point of view. But from my point of view, his world was already very dark without me, or with me, or without me in it. But I could see that from his point of view, he had this illusion about me. And from my point of view, he'd never really knew me or understood me well enough to really, so so what he was grieving, and from my point of view, was not me, because he had some illusion about what I am. So whatever friend that he thought he lost, well, that friend never existed in the first place. So I didn't feel responsible for inflicting that loss on him. And, the truth is, I'm not responsible. But I could see his pain, which is the point that is more pertinent. I could see his pain. And his pain, preceded me. It's just me. I happen to be present in a period of his life, and I was kind enough and open enough with him that he caught a glimpse of something else, something that was, very meaningful to him. And though he never really did much to honor it in words, I could see that he had, very strong feelings. In relationship to me. But, again, was it me, or was I just, a filter, was I some illusion of his? Well, to some extent, I think I showed him something that made him realize, that there's something perhaps more to life than just, doing drugs and, being a nasty little prick. So, yeah. So the point I wanted to make here, and the reason I'm telling the story, is because I wanted to talk about, how when our eyes feel safe to see what is, and our heart feels safe to feel what is, and our ears feel safe to hear what is, like if we invite that into our sensory perception, if we invite our senses to tell us the truth, and we make the truth not a heavy burden, but we touch it lightly, then our ears will hear the truth more readily, our eyes will see the truth more readily, and our heart will feel the truth more readily, because we're not punishing our senses for telling us what is. And so I saw more of what is, and I felt more of what was going on with my former friend than I had before, because I gave up my investment into needing him to be something horrible, something very obnoxious, to justify, my decisions. The reality is no one needs to justify their decisions. You're free to make your decisions based on whatever feeling or value, whatever, is valuable to you. That is a truth, in and of itself. That is relevant. It's relevant enough. If something feels, incorrect, it's okay that we avoid it. We don't have to fully understand it. in order to respect it within ourselves, respect what our senses tell us. If something feels right, we don't, need to question it so heavily in order to pursue it. If it really feels right, there's a certain amount of trust that we need to establish within ourselves, self-trust, to listen to learn like what our own values really are, because we can't really it's not possible to follow other people's values, and it's very difficult sometimes to understand what our own values are, because our personal values are not something that we gain from somebody else specifically. Our personal values are something that we gain from measuring the temperature internally and seeing how does this fit. Is there something profoundly meaningful in this for me? And by learning to trust that, we begin to allow our senses to learn to trust what they see, and our feelings to trust what they feel. And that we don't necessarily need to have a good explanation for other people or this world, or even for our own mind. That sort of allowing that, sort of standing back and objectively allowing that experience to be the first and foremost thing that we consider when we approach the world. That allows the truth more into us, because the truth is like a very shy thing. And if we don't approach it lightly, we sort of, by trying to touch the truth, we push the truth away from us. So when we touch the truth, we sort of have to touch it without moving it, without rearranging it. We just have to barely put our hand on the surface of the truth without an agenda. And that will be the truth that lives inside of us. And that will be the truth that allows you to see what is. And in seeing what is, here's the secret. When you see what is, forgiveness happens automatically. Because you no longer see how things have offended you. You just see how things were. And how things were are not the same as the narrative of your life story. Because what has really happened is something that is kind of like God. It is beyond the beyond. It is beyond the physical realm. It's beyond what we can put into words. And is beyond what we narrate to ourselves as human beings. It's beyond our instinct to categorize and identify and to moralize. And so forgiveness takes place when we invite the truth. When we invite our eyes to see what they see, our heart to feel what it feels, our ears to hear what they hear, and when we touch the truth so very gently with our hands. So anyhow, just wanted to record this experience to the best of my abilities. And have a good one.